Two things you need to know about Jane Austen is that she hates Bath and she hates betrayal. Welcome to this installment of Reading Jane. This is episode 2, Northanger Abbey. If you don't know, my name is Imogen. I'm currently doing a series where I'm reading every Jane Austen book for the first time and telling you my thoughts on them. Episode 1 was Pride and Prejudice, which was probably a couple of weeks ago by this point. And episode 2 is today, which is Northanger Abbey. I only recently read Northanger Abbey and I had thoughts. and I had feelings. But first we're going to do a quick little recap of the book for those who don't know what it's about. Northanger Abbey is a Gothic novel, which is split into 2 parts. Part 1 following Catherine, our heroine, as she navigates the gossipy world that she lives in Bath. And part 2 is more of a departure from Jane Austen's typical style. It really gets into the Gothic, where Catherine spends a lot of time at Northanger Abbey, which is like a Gothic mansion, and there's mysteries and secrets, and as I said, there's lots of gossip, as Jane does very well. And ultimately Catherine ends up with a husband, but the plot of the book doesn't really revolve around the romance as much as many of Jane's other books do. And so ultimately it's more kind of like, it's Jane's way of making fun of the Gothic kind of style that was emerging, whilst also kind of branching out from her usual type of novel that she wrote. If you didn't know already, I have actually read 3 Jane Austen books, this one being included, one being Pride and Prejudice and the other being Persuasion. But I read Persuasion when I was traveling and I was really jet lagged and I don't remember that much about it. So for the purposes of this, we're going to say that I've only read 2, which would be this one and Pride and Prejudice, which episode 1 was on. As a novel, Northanger Abbey is such a joy to read. It is fast-paced, it is quick, it is witty, it's silly, it's mysterious. It is so different from anything else I've read at that time. Like, it's so clever in a way that I feel like we don't often get to see Jane Austen shine. I just really enjoyed it. There's an unnamed narrator who is kind of like interjecting throughout. We can assume it to be Jane, but it's never said, oh, this is the author speaking. It's more just like, this is the narrator. And the narrator interjects about Catherine's validity as a heroine because she is tomboyish and she didn't really have like wifely urges. That's a really weird way to put it, but she didn't really want to get married. She wasn't like other Jane Austen protagonists who are constantly in pursuit of a man or constantly in pursuit of the idea of marriage, but she's also quite similar to some of Jane's other protagonists, namely Lizzie Bennet, who they're just not really concerned with the idea of getting married. They're more concerned with the idea of their family and the people around them. This one is a bloody roller coaster. There's betrayal, there's love, there's friendship, there's breakups, there's lies. All in all, it's a really enjoyable book. It's such a fast read. I actually think this is now my favorite Jane Austen. As I said, I've only read a couple, so it's pretty early on to say I have a favorite, but this would be my favorite based on what I've read so far, because it's just so unique and so fun. And it's genuinely such an easy read as a classic novel. In episode 1, I spoke about the accessibility of Pride and Prejudice as a novel, and I really think Northanger Abbey falls into that kind of style of an accessible classic novel that makes you want to read more classic novels. Generally speaking, it's short, it is easy, the language is not convoluted, and whilst there are some run-on sentences that actually did my head in, most of the book it's really just beautiful and lyrical and funny. It's way funnier than I thought it was going to be, because all I've heard about it was that it's like a dark Gothic novel. And it is to an extent. It's obviously not like a Frankenstein level Gothic novel. I spoke about Frankenstein in the last episode, I think, but it's obviously not like a Frankenstein level of like spooky, but it is definitely spookier than any of Jane's other works that I've read, at least. 2 things you need to know about Jane Austen is that she hates Bath and she hates betrayal. And that really comes across in this book. I just found it to be so enjoyable. I might see if I can find some things that I really liked. I did write a lot of comments in this book, especially about Catherine as a character. She was a really interesting character, and I feel like such a departure from the usual Jane Austen heroine, and I found it so refreshing. So this is the first line of the book. No one who had ever seen Catherine Morland in her infancy would have supposed her born to be an heroine, which is technically grammatically correct, it's just clunky. She was fond of all boys' plays and greatly preferred cricket, not merely to dolls, but to the more heroic enjoyments in infancy, nursing a dormouse, feeding a canary bird, or watering a rose bush. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I annotated, I underlined, I just found it to be such a beautiful departure from what I was used to and what I was expecting with Jane. I found the narrator to be really interesting. As someone who typically doesn't really like the kind of style where the narrator will interject with their thoughts and feelings, I actually really appreciated it in this book because it provided a lot more context to what we were hearing and what we were talking about, especially towards the end of the book, because it becomes less about Catherine and more about Catherine's story. The narrator recounts Catherine's story as if it were a real person, which makes the book really fun and interesting and super unique. I feel like I've never in my memory read something like this, especially from someone who typically doesn't write this way. Generally speaking, Catherine as a protagonist is described as generous. She's often described as amiable, which is such a fun word and I wish we would bring that back. She's kind-hearted. She's not necessarily naive, but she does trust people very easily, and she's kind of like flighty and like a bit silly, which I really enjoy. She's not dark, and especially when she is in Northanger Abbey and she's like finding this mysterious chest and she's like walking down dark hallways, the contradiction of her like light and airy personality with the dark gothic nature of the setting is really refreshing. I haven't really spoken too much about the love interest because I really do think this book is mostly about Catherine, but his name is Mr. Henry Tilney, and he is definitely an underrated love interest in Jane Austen. He basically does nothing wrong the entire book. He's like a perfect gentleman. I wrote this note and it says, if he wanted to, he would, because that sums up Henry Tilney. He loves his wife. He loves Catherine, and he will show it. After obviously some drama, but at the end, he loves her and he will show it. And yeah, I just find them to be so cute. I think I spoke about in my episode 1 with Pride and Prejudice, talking about how both Lizzie and Mr. Darcy are super grumpy, and I think this is really nice that Catherine and Mr. Henry Tilney are both quite like happy. They're sunshine characters. I think Northanger Abbey, I haven't heard much about it. I think it's hugely underrated, especially for those who like the Gothic novel, which I personally do. I really like Gothic novels, so I was really excited to read this for the spooky season. I think this is a really good book if you are the kind of person who is trying to get into classics, and maybe you kind of like that like Bridgerton Regency aesthetic, especially with the narrator interjecting. She's kind of Lady Whistledowning around. She provides a lot of information about other characters because this book at its core is just basically Gossip Girl. Like, it is so fun. It is just so silly. Like, there's just such betrayal. The friendship betrayal and friendship breakups that happen in this book are so intense, and there is like barely any like romance in this book. The central theme is not romance. The central theme is gossip. The central theme is, let me tell you a story about a bitch named Isabella. Like, it's literally like so fun. I found this book to be quite detail heavy, which, you know, isn't bad, but she'd be like, here came a man. He had curly hair. He was wearing a blue shirt and a blue tie and a black coat and black pants, and his shoes were scuffed and this and that, and it's all one sentence, and sometimes that does do my head in just a little bit and drive me up the wall just a little bit, but I feel like it's quite fun, especially towards the end, because I guess it is a narrator and not from the perspective of the main character, so it's kind of trying to give us that like bigger picture stuff. I'd like to share with you a really long sentence that I wrote a note about how long the sentence was. From this state of humiliation she was roused at the end of 10 minutes to a pleasanter feeling by seeing not Mr. Thorpe but Mr. Tilney within 3 yards of the place where they sat. He seemed to be moving that way, but he did not see her, and therefore the smile and the blush which his sudden reappearance raised in Catherine passed away without sullying her heroic importance. That is one sentence. There's maybe 3 commas. I just find that so annoying sometimes. Here's another line I really enjoyed. She was heartily ashamed of her ignorance, a misplaced shame. Where people wish to attach, they should always be ignorant. To come with a well-informed mind is to come with an inability of ministering the vanity of others, which a sensible person would always wish to avoid. A woman especially, if she has the misfortune of knowing anything, she should conceal it as well as she can. So yeah, all in all, Northanger Abbey, in terms of rating, I'm going to give it a general 5. In terms of vibes, I'm definitely going to give it a 5. The gothic vibe was amazing. I really liked all the characters. There wasn't a single character where I was like, this person is pointless. In terms of romance, I am going to give it like a 3.5. And that's only because when you read it, it does kind of feel like the romance isn't primary in this novel. It's not about the romance, and then it kind of not comes out of nowhere because Henry Tilney is in the book for quite a while, but it does kind of just get tacked on the end. I wonder if that was because she wanted Catherine to have her happy ending, or I wonder if it was because she thought it would sell better or do better. I'm not really sure, but I do kind of feel like it would have been fine without it. So yeah. But overall, yeah, it's a 5. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I'm so excited, so excited to read more Jane Austen, especially after this, because obviously Pride and Prejudice is so famous and so spoken of and known about. So when I had read it, I was like, cool. That was a book that everyone loves that I loved. Whereas with this, I haven't heard that much about it. So it was quite nice. It was quite unexpected and I really enjoyed it. But yeah, so that was Reading Jane episode 2 with Northanger Abbey. Next episode will be Sense and Sensibility, which I am going to start reading right now. And thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic, fantabulous, gorgeous, beautiful summer's day. And I love your little face, and I hope I'm staring you in the eyes very soon. Mwah!